The journey begins. Jeremiah tugged at the straps of his backpack, adjusting them to sit higher on his small shoulders. The bag was old, patched together in places with pieces of denim his mother had sewn on long ago, but it served its purpose. It carried his most valuable possessions: a few dog-eared textbooks, a battered notebook with frayed edges, and a pencil stub that had seen better days. These items were his lifeline, the tools that fueled his dream of a better future. The morning air was crisp and quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of gravel under his sneakers and the occasional chirp of birds waking with the dawn. Jeremiah tilted his head back to glance at the sky. Shades of pink and orange streaked across the horizon, a brief, fleeting beauty that he cherished on mornings like this. To him, it was a reminder that no matter how difficult life was, there was still beauty to be found if you looked closely enough. The 20-mile walk to school was daunting, but it wasn't just about distance. The path wound through different terrains, quiet neighborhoods, fields dotted with abandoned machinery, and dense woods where the trees grew so close together that sunlight barely filtered through. Jeremiah had walked this path so many times that he knew every twist and turn by heart. The overgrown bushes at the edge of the woods, the broken wooden bridge that wobbled underfoot, and the lone mailbox that leaned sideways at the entrance of an empty lot. They were all landmarks that marked his progress. He reached the first bend in the road, where the cracked pavement gave way to a dirt trail. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint smell of damp earth. Jeremiah slowed his pace and took a deep breath, savoring the stillness. This was his favorite part of the walk, a stretch of road where he could let his thoughts wander. Jeremiah didn't see the walk as a burden. To him, it was an opportunity to dream. As his feet carried him forward, his mind drifted to the future he hoped to build for himself and his family. He imagined himself as a scientist, wearing a white lab coat and working in a brightly lit laboratory. Or maybe he'd become an artist, painting vivid landscapes inspired by the ones he saw on his walks. He wasn't sure yet, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever he chose, it would be far removed from the struggles of his current life. His family's tiny home sat on the outskirts of town, far from the school he attended. It was a crumbling structure with peeling paint and a roof that leaked when it rained. Inside, the walls were lined with mismatched furniture and faded photographs of better days. His mother, bedridden with a chronic illness, often tried to hide her pain behind a smile. His older brother, Sam, worked odd jobs to keep food on the table, but even that wasn't always enough. Jeremiah's walks to school were as much about survival as they were about education. School wasn't just a place to learn. It was a place where he could eat a warm meal, escape the weight of his responsibilities, and feel like a kid again, if only for a little while. As he continued down the trail, he passed a small clearing where wildflowers grew in abundance. He paused for a moment, crouching down to pick a few blooms. He didn't need them, but his little sister loved flowers, and he always made sure to bring her some when he returned home. The sound of an approaching car snapped him out of his thoughts. Jeremiah quickly stepped off the road, pressing himself against the trees to let the vehicle pass. It was a sleek, black sedan, the kind he only ever saw in the wealthier parts of town. As it sped by, he caught a glimpse of the driver, a man in a crisp suit, his face set in a stern expression. The car disappeared around the bend, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. Jeremiah watched it go, his heart sinking slightly. He didn't envy the man in the car, but he couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to live a life where you didn't have to walk for hours just to get to school. He shook off the thought and pressed on. The trail led him to a wooden bridge that spanned a shallow creek. The wood creaked under his weight as he crossed, and for a brief moment, he stopped to look down at the water. The creek was clear and cold, its surface rippling with the gentle current. Jeremiah crouched down and splashed some water on his face, relishing the coolness against his skin. As he stood, he heard a rustling sound from the bushes on the other side of the bridge. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't uncommon to encounter stray dogs or even wild animals along his route, but he always approached these situations with caution. Slowly, he backed away from the bridge, his eyes scanning the underbrush. A moment later, a small rabbit darted out from the bushes, its fluffy tail disappearing into the woods. Jeremiah let out a sigh of relief, chuckling softly at his own nervousness. "Just a rabbit," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. By the time he reached the halfway point of his journey, the sun had risen higher in the sky, casting a golden light over the landscape. Sweat dripped down his face, and his legs ached with each step, but he didn't let it slow him down. He thought of his classmates who took buses or rode in cars to school, and he wondered if they even realized how lucky they were. Jeremiah didn't resent them, though. He was proud of his resilience, proud of the fact that he refused to let his circumstances define him. With every step he took, he felt a small surge of defiance against the challenges life had thrown his way. Unbeknownst to Jeremiah, a pair of watchful eyes followed his every move. From the safety of his patrol car, Officer Turner observed the boy's steady pace and determined expression. The officer had seen Jeremiah walking this route before, but he'd never thought much about it, until now. Something about the boy's journey struck a chord with him, and for the first time, he felt compelled to find out why Jeremiah walked such a long distance alone every day. As Jeremiah disappeared around the next bend, Officer Turner made a decision. Today, he would follow the boy and uncover the truth behind his journey. A cop's curiosity grows. Officer Turner tapped his fingers against the steering wheel of his patrol car, parked discreetly near the old oak tree at the edge of town. The early morning sun gleamed off the hood, casting long shadows across the quiet road. He sipped lukewarm coffee from his travel mug, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the distant figure of the boy trudging along the winding path. Jeremiah. Turner had noticed the kid before, too many times to count. The boy was always alone, always walking with a determined yet quiet resolve. Turner had assumed he was just another kid wandering the back roads, maybe skipping school or causing trouble. After all, in a town like theirs, not everyone stayed on the straight and narrow. But today, something nagged at the officer's gut. A kid walking miles through dusty roads every day didn't sit right with him. Turner prided himself on knowing the ins and outs of the community. He knew where the trouble spots were, which kids came from which families, and who needed a little extra watching. But Jeremiah was a mystery, a quiet shadow who passed unnoticed by most, but had now caught the full attention of the seasoned officer. The kid couldn't be more than 8 or 9, Turner guessed, too young to be making such a trek alone. And those shoes, worn-down soles barely clinging to the fabric, told a story Turner didn't need words to understand. Life hadn't been kind to this boy. "Where are you going, kid?" Turner muttered to himself, setting the mug down and starting the engine. The patrol car hummed to life, and Turner pulled onto the road, keeping a good distance behind Jeremiah. He didn't want to spook the boy. If Jeremiah noticed the police car trailing him, he might panic or change his route. Turner had learned the art of subtle observation over the years. It was part of the job. As the road narrowed and the pavement gave way to dirt, Turner's curiosity deepened. Most kids would have turned back by now or taken a different route, but Jeremiah kept walking, his pace steady despite the rising heat of the day. Turner's eyes narrowed as he noted the boy's posture, straight-backed, determined, as though carrying an invisible weight on his small shoulders. The officer's radio crackled to life. "Turner, you there?" It was dispatch. "Yeah, I'm here," he responded, keeping one hand on the wheel. "Need you to check out a noise complaint on Elm Street." Turner hesitated, glancing at Jeremiah through the windshield. The boy was nearing the edge of a wooded area where the road curved sharply out of sight. "Copy that," Turner said, "but I'm tied up on something right now. I'll head over as soon as I'm clear." "Roger that," dispatch replied. Turner switched off the radio, his focus fully back on the boy. Jeremiah disappeared around the bend, and Turner's grip on the wheel tightened. He pressed the gas gently, closing the distance just enough to keep the boy in sight. The woods loomed on either side, their dense foliage casting shadows across the dirt path. Turner knew this stretch well, isolated and rarely traveled. Why would a kid be out here alone? Jeremiah's pace never faltered, even as the road grew rougher. Turner's curiosity morphed into concern. He'd seen plenty of kids wander into trouble, some by choice, others by circumstance. But there was something different about Jeremiah. The boy moved with purpose, as though driven by a force stronger than mere necessity. As Turner followed, his mind raced with possibilities. Was the kid running from something? Or to something? Either way, Turner was determined to find out. Up ahead, Jeremiah reached a rickety wooden bridge that spanned a narrow creek. The boards creaked under his weight, and Turner instinctively slowed the car. He didn't want the sound of the engine startling the boy. Jeremiah paused at the edge of the bridge, crouching down to splash water on his face. Turner took the moment to observe him more closely. The boy's clothes were worn but clean, his face damp with sweat. Despite the obvious signs of hardship, there was a quiet strength about him, a resilience that Turner couldn't help but admire. Jeremiah stood up, brushing his hands on his jeans, and continued across the bridge. Turner waited until the boy was safely on the other side before driving forward, the patrol car creeping across the unstable wood. Beyond the bridge, the road opened up into a clearing where wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze. Jeremiah moved through them without pause, his focus fixed on the horizon. Turner followed, his mind filled with unanswered questions. Finally, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Turner decided to make his presence known. He pulled the car to a stop a few yards ahead of the boy and stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. Jeremiah froze, his wide eyes locking onto the uniformed figure standing in his path. "Morning," Turner said, keeping his tone light. Jeremiah didn't respond. His body tensed, and Turner could see the fear flicker across his face. "It's okay, kid," Turner said gently. "I'm not here to give you a hard time. Just noticed you've been walking this road a lot. Mind if I ask where you're headed?" Jeremiah's lips pressed into a thin line. He glanced down at his feet, scuffing the dirt with the toe of his sneaker. "School," he finally muttered, his voice barely audible. "School, ah?" Turner raised an eyebrow. "That's a long walk for a school day. How far do you go?" Jeremiah shrugged. 20 miles. Turner's breath caught in his throat. 20 miles. That couldn't be right. No kid should have to walk that far just to get an education. "Why don't you take the bus?" Turner asked, genuinely curious. Jeremiah's gaze remained fixed on the ground. "No bus comes out where I live," he admitted quietly. "And we don't have a car." Turner's heart clenched. He hadn't expected that. "You do this every day?" Jeremiah nodded. For a moment, Turner was at a loss for words. The boy's simple admission spoke volumes about the hardships he faced. Turner had seen poverty before, but something about Jeremiah's quiet determination struck a chord deep within him. "Well," Turner said, clearing his throat, "you're tougher than most people I know." Jeremiah glanced up, surprised by the compliment. "Look," Turner continued, "I'm not here to cause trouble, but I don't like the idea of you walking all this way alone. Mind if I follow along for a bit, just to make sure you're safe?" Jeremiah hesitated, then gave a small nod. As the two began walking side by side, Turner couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of a story far more complex than he had anticipated. He was determined to uncover the truth behind Jeremiah's long journey, and to find a way to help the boy who had already endured far more than any child should. The unspoken burden. Jeremiah kept his pace steady, his small legs moving rhythmically over the uneven path. Officer Turner walked beside him, his polished boots crunching against gravel with each step. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant chirp of birds. Turner glanced sideways at the boy, noting the tension in his young face. Jeremiah's eyes were fixed ahead, his jaw set with a determination that seemed far too heavy for someone his age. Turner had seen that look before, in soldiers returning from battles they couldn't quite leave behind. It was the look of someone carrying burdens too great for their shoulders. "So, Jeremiah," Turner began, keeping his tone casual, "what grade are you in?" "Fourth," Jeremiah replied without looking up. "Fourth grade, huh? You like school?" A small shrug. "It's okay." Turner smiled faintly. "When I was your age, I couldn't sit still in class. Teachers were always telling me to stop talking. Guess I found a job where talking's part of the gig." Jeremiah's lips twitched, but the hint of a smile faded quickly. The cop decided to try a different approach. "You got any favorite subjects?" "Math," Jeremiah said quietly. "I like solving problems." "Smart kid," Turner nodded approvingly. "Math was never my thing. Guess that's why I ended up writing traffic tickets instead of figuring out how to launch rockets." Jeremiah remained quiet, his gaze distant. Turner sensed that there was more beneath the surface, something the boy wasn't saying. He'd learned over the years that people often needed time before they opened up, and patience was key. As they walked, the landscape began to change. The dirt road gave way to patches of grass and wildflowers, the scent of earth thick in the air. They passed a rusted fence that leaned precariously to one side, its barbed wire tangled with vines. "You always walk this way?" Turner asked. Jeremiah nodded. "It's the only way." Turner frowned. "No shortcuts?" "There's one through the woods, but—" Jeremiah hesitated, his voice trailing off. "But what?" Jeremiah's eyes flicked toward the dense forest to their right. "It's not safe." Turner followed his gaze. The woods were thick and shadowy, the kind of place where even grown men might think twice before venturing. "Animals," Turner guessed. Jeremiah shook his head. "People." The single word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Turner felt a surge of protectiveness rise in his chest. "Anyone ever bother you?" Turner asked, his voice low but firm. Jeremiah hesitated before shaking his head. "Not if I stay on the road." Turner filed that information away, making a mental note to patrol this area more often. They continued in silence for a while, until the path sloped downward toward a shallow creek. Jeremiah hopped over the stones with practiced ease, while Turner took a longer route around the water's edge. As they climbed the next rise, Turner decided to ask a question that had been gnawing at him. "Jeremiah, can I ask you something?" The boy glanced at him warily. "Why do you walk all the way to school instead of transferring to one closer?" Jeremiah's face darkened, and for a moment, Turner thought he wouldn't answer. But then the boy sighed, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "Because this school's different," Jeremiah said quietly. "It's the only place that lets me dream." Turner frowned. "What do you mean?" Jeremiah's voice was barely above a whisper. "The other schools don't care about kids like me. They just push us through. But my teacher at this school, she believes I can be something more." Turner felt a lump form in his throat. He'd seen too many kids fall through the cracks, their potential overlooked by a system that didn't always care. But here was a boy willing to walk 20 miles just to be in a place where someone believed in him. "You got a good head on your shoulders, kid," Turner said softly. "Not everyone would go that far for a dream." Jeremiah shrugged, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. As they reached a crossroads where the path split in two directions, Turner noticed something odd. A dilapidated wooden shack stood off to the side, half hidden by overgrown bushes. The roof sagged, and the windows were covered in grime. It looked abandoned, but Turner's instincts told him otherwise. "That place been there long?" Turner asked, nodding toward the shack. Jeremiah's expression grew guarded. "Yeah. No one lives there, though." Turner filed the information away, his senses on high alert. He didn't like loose ends, and that shack was definitely one. They resumed their journey, the school now just a few miles away. Turner admired the boy's resilience, his ability to push through fatigue and hardship without complaint. "Jeremiah," Turner said after a moment, "you ever think about asking for help with this walk?" The boy shook his head firmly. "We don't ask for help." Turner's chest tightened. "Why not?" Jeremiah's voice was steady but filled with quiet pain. "Because people always got something they want in return." Turner's heart ached at the harsh truth in those words. No child should grow up believing that kindness came with strings attached. "Well," Turner said, his voice resolute, "you met one person today who doesn't want anything from you." Jeremiah glanced at him skeptically. "You just keep doing your thing, kid," Turner added. "But know this, you're not alone anymore." "Got it." For the first time, Jeremiah's guard slipped, and a glimmer of gratitude shone in his eyes. As the school building came into view in the distance, Turner knew this wouldn't be the last time he walked this road with Jeremiah. There were questions that still needed answers and challenges that needed solutions. But for now, Turner was content knowing that he'd taken the first step in being the support Jeremiah never thought he could ask for. And as the boy's worn sneakers scuffed against the ground, Turner silently vowed to find a way to make that journey shorter, not just in miles, but in burdens. Behind closed doors, as Jeremiah disappeared into the school building, Officer Turner lingered by his patrol car, watching until the boy was safely inside. The echoes of children laughing and chattering filled the air as the morning bell rang, marking the start of another school day. Yet Turner's mind was far from the bustling schoolyard. It was back on the lonely, winding path that Jeremiah traveled every morning. A 20-mile trek through dangerous roads in isolation wasn't just unusual, it was unacceptable. Turner knew there was more to this story than Jeremiah had let on. As he pulled away from the school, his hands clenched the wheel tighter than usual. Questions swirled in his mind. Why hadn't anyone reported the situation? Where were Jeremiah's parents? And why did the boy seem so reluctant to accept help? Turner decided he wasn't going to let this go. He had a duty to protect and serve, and that included kids like Jeremiah. Especially kids like Jeremiah. Later that afternoon, Turner parked his patrol car at the edge of the same dirt road where he'd first spotted Jeremiah. The sun hung lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. He leaned against the hood, arms crossed, waiting. It wasn't long before he saw the familiar figure trudging toward him, backpack slung over one shoulder. Jeremiah's pace was slower now, his small body visibly worn from the day. Turner pushed off the car and approached him with a friendly wave. "Hey, kid," he greeted. "Mind if I walk with you again?" Jeremiah hesitated, but eventually nodded. "Sure." They walked in silence for a while, the sounds of nature filling the gaps between their footsteps. Turner let the quiet stretch, giving Jeremiah the space to speak if he wanted to. "School go okay?" Turner finally asked. Jeremiah shrugged. "It was fine." "You learn anything cool in math today?" "We did fractions," Jeremiah said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I got all the problems right." Turner smiled. "Nice. I bet your teacher was impressed." Jeremiah's expression softened. "She said I'm good at thinking things through." Sounds like she knows what she's talking about. As they continued down the path, Turner's gaze drifted to the horizon. The dilapidated shack they'd passed earlier loomed in the distance, its silhouette dark against the fading sky. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just an abandoned structure. "Jeremiah," Turner said carefully, "where do you live?" Jeremiah's steps faltered for a fraction of a second. "Just up the road," he said evasively. "Mind if I see?" Turner asked, keeping his tone light. Jeremiah's face tensed. "Why?" Turner met his gaze with sincerity. "Just making sure everything's okay. That's part of my job, you know." The boy's shoulders slumped, and Turner could see the internal battle playing out in his mind. Finally, Jeremiah sighed and nodded. "Okay, but it's not much." They walked in silence until they reached a narrow, overgrown path that veered off from the main road. Jeremiah led the way, pushing aside branches and tall grass. Turner followed, his senses on high alert. As they emerged from the thicket, a small weathered house came into view. The roof was patched with mismatched shingles, and the front porch sagged under its own weight. The yard was littered with rusted tools and broken furniture. A single, cracked window reflected the fading light. Jeremiah hesitated at the front steps, his hand tightening around the frayed strap of his backpack. "This is it," he said quietly. Turner's heart ached at the sight. He'd seen plenty of tough living situations in his time, but knowing a kid lived here alone, or even with minimal support, hit differently. "Anyone home?" Turner asked gently. Jeremiah shook his head. "Mom's at work. She won't be back until late." "No one else?" Jeremiah's gaze dropped to the ground. "Just me." Turner took a slow breath, fighting back the frustration building inside him. He had to handle this carefully. Kids like Jeremiah were often fiercely protective of their families, no matter how dire the circumstances. "Your mom work a lot?" Turner asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah," Jeremiah said softly. "She works 2 jobs, nights at the diner and mornings at the factory." Turner nodded, understanding the sacrifices she was making, but that didn't change the fact that Jeremiah was essentially raising himself. "You got food in there?" Turner asked, tilting his head toward the house. Jeremiah hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Turner knew better than to press too hard right away. Trust was earned, not demanded. "Well," Turner said, "I'm glad I got to see where you live, and I'll be around, just so you know. You're not walking that road alone anymore." Jeremiah's eyes flicked up to meet his, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty shining in them. "Why do you care?" Turner's voice softened. "Because it's my job to care. And because sometimes people just need someone in their corner." "You deserve that, Jeremiah." The boy's expression wavered, as though he wanted to believe those words but wasn't sure he could. "You'll see," Turner promised. "Things are going to get better." As Turner turned to leave, he made a silent vow to follow through on that promise. He wasn't just going to be a cop passing through Jeremiah's life. He was going to be the difference the boy needed. Later that night, Turner sat at his kitchen table, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. He'd already made calls to social services and the local school board, gathering information and resources. He wasn't going to let this slip through the cracks. Jeremiah deserved better. And Turner was determined to make sure he got it. The hidden truth. The next morning, Officer Turner found himself back at the familiar dirt path, waiting for Jeremiah. The crisp dawn air nipped at his skin, and the horizon blushed with hues of gold and pink. He leaned against his patrol car, arms crossed, scanning the road for any sign of the boy. It didn't take long. Jeremiah appeared in the distance, his small frame silhouetted against the rising sun. His backpack bounced slightly with each step, and Turner noticed the same determined expression etched on his face. As the boy drew closer, Turner pushed off the car with a friendly wave. "Morning, Jeremiah." Jeremiah looked surprised but not displeased. "Morning, Officer Turner. Mind if I walk with you again?" Jeremiah shrugged. "Guess not." They fell into step together, the rhythm of their footsteps sensing naturally. Turner decided to ease into the conversation, sensing that today might be the day he learned more about the boy's hidden struggles. "You know," Turner said casually, "I was thinking about what you said yesterday. How your mom works 2 jobs. Jeremiah's expression grew guarded. "That's gotta be tough," Turner continued. "You must help out a lot at home." Jeremiah kicked a small stone down the path. "Yeah, I take care of things." Turner nodded thoughtfully. "You cook?" "Sometimes," Jeremiah admitted. "Mostly sandwiches and stuff." "That's pretty impressive," Turner said. "When I was your age, I could barely make cereal without spilling milk everywhere." A small smile tugged at Jeremiah's lips, but it quickly faded. "It's just what I gotta do." Turner's heart ached at the boy's matter-of-fact tone. No child should have to carry that kind of responsibility. You know, Turner said carefully, I did some checking yesterday. Jeremiah's steps faltered. Checking? Yeah, just wanted to make sure you and your mom were okay. Turner's voice was gentle but firm. I called the school too. They said you're one of their best students. Jeremiah's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and embarrassment. I try. You're doing more than trying, kid. You're doing amazing. Jeremiah didn't respond, but Turner could see the boy's resolve weakening, as though he were carrying a weight too heavy to bear alone. They continued walking until they reached the familiar crossroads near the dilapidated shack. Turner glanced at it again, unease prickling at the back of his neck. You ever go near that place? Turner asked, nodding toward the shack. Jeremiah's expression darkened. No, it's not safe. Why not? Jeremiah hesitated, then lowered his voice. Sometimes people go there. They're not good people. Turner's instincts went on high alert. What kind of people? Jeremiah's gaze darted nervously toward the shack. I don't know their names, but they come at night sometimes. I hear them when I'm walking home. Turner clenched his jaw. He'd suspected there was more to this area than met the eye, and now he had confirmation. Thanks for telling me, Turner said. I'll check it out. Jeremiah looked worried. Be careful, Officer Turner. They're dangerous. Turner's voice was steady. So am I, kid. That afternoon, after ensuring Jeremiah made it safely to school, Turner returned to the shack. The sun hung high in the sky, casting harsh shadows across the landscape. The place looked even more decrepit in the daylight, its sagging roof and weathered walls a testament to years of neglect. Turner approached cautiously, his hand resting on the grip of his service weapon. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and decay. He scanned the perimeter, noting signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dirt, discarded cigarette butts, and empty beer cans. Pushing open the creaking door, Turner stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light streaming through cracks in the walls. The interior was sparse, with a rickety table and a few broken chairs scattered about. But it wasn't the furniture that caught Turner's attention. It was the stash of items piled in the corner. Electronics, jewelry, and other valuables were stacked haphazardly, along with a black duffel bag partially unzipped to reveal bundles of cash. Turner's stomach tightened. This wasn't just an abandoned shack. It was a hideout for criminals. He pulled out his radio. This is Officer Turner. I'm at the old shack off County Road 17. Found evidence of a burglary ring. Requesting backup. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. Copy that, Officer Turner. Backup is en route. Turner kept his weapon drawn as he continued to search the shack. His instincts told him that whoever used this place might return at any moment. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Turner's grip tightened on his gun as he moved toward the doorway. Two men appeared, both rough-looking and armed with knives. They froze when they saw Turner, their eyes narrowing. Hands where I can see them, Turner commanded. One of the men sneered. You're outnumbered, cop. Turner's voice was cold and steady. I wouldn't bet on it. The tension was palpable as the men weighed their options. Backup was on the way, but Turner knew he had to hold his ground until then. You really want to do this? Turner challenged. Because I promise you, it won't end well for you. The men exchanged glances, their bravado faltering. Before they could make a move, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder by the second. The men cursed and bolted, but Turner was faster. He tackled one to the ground, disarming him with practiced precision. The second man was apprehended by the arriving officers. As the scene was secured, Turner breathed a sigh of relief. The shack was officially out of commission, and the criminals were in custody. Later that evening, Turner parked his patrol car near Jeremiah's house. The boy sat on the porch steps, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. You okay, Officer Turner? Jeremiah asked as Turner approached. Better than okay, Turner said with a smile. That shack won't be a problem anymore. Jeremiah's eyes widened. You did that. Had some help, Turner admitted. But yeah, you don't have to worry about those guys anymore. Jeremiah's expression softened with relief. Thanks, he said quietly. Turner crouched down to meet his gaze. Listen, Jeremiah. You're not alone, okay? You got people who care about you now. Me included. Jeremiah's voice wavered. It's hard to believe that sometimes. I know, Turner said gently. But we're going to make things better. Together. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Turner knew this was just the beginning of their journey. But one thing was certain. Jeremiah's days of walking that lonely road were over. A new beginning. The morning sun cast a warm golden glow over the small town as Jeremiah sat on the front porch, his backpack resting beside him. A cool breeze ruffled his worn hoodie, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from a nearby field. Today was different from all the others. Jeremiah could feel it in his bones. The weight he'd carried for so long felt lighter, as though some invisible hand had lifted it from his young shoulders. The sound of tires crunching against gravel caught his attention. Looking up, he saw Officer Turner's patrol car pull to a stop at the edge of the yard. Turner stepped out, his expression warm and determined. Morning, Jeremiah, Turner greeted with a wave. Morning, Officer Turner, Jeremiah replied, standing up. Turner gestured to the car. Mind if I give you a ride to school today? Jeremiah's eyes widened. Really? Really? Turner said with a grin. Hop in. Jeremiah didn't need to be asked twice. He grabbed his backpack and climbed into the passenger seat, the leather creaking beneath him. As Turner started the engine, Jeremiah glanced out the window, a smile tugging at his lips. I guess I won't miss that long walk, Jeremiah admitted. Turner chuckled. I hope not. You deserve better than that. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape blurring past. Jeremiah's mind wandered to all the changes that had happened over the past few days. The dangerous shack was gone, the criminals arrested thanks to Turner's bravery, and for the first time in a long while, Jeremiah felt safe. But there was still one thing lingering in the back of his mind, something he hadn't shared with anyone. Officer Turner. Jeremiah's voice was hesitant. Yeah, kid. There's something I need to tell you. Turner glanced at him, his expression serious. What is it? Jeremiah took a deep breath. It's about my mom. She works so hard, but we're struggling. Sometimes there's not enough food. And the house, it's falling apart. His voice wavered. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to get her in trouble. Turner's heart ached at the boy's honesty. Jeremiah, telling the truth doesn't get people in trouble. It gets them the help they need. Jeremiah nodded slowly, as though trying to believe those words. Here's the thing, Turner said gently. I've already reached out to some folks who can help. There are programs that can make sure you have food and that your house gets fixed up. But I need your permission to get them involved. Jeremiah's eyes glistened with tears. You really think they'll help us? I know they will, Turner said firmly. And I'll be with you every step of the way. Jeremiah swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. Okay. That afternoon, Turner made good on his promise. He contacted local social services and community organizations, rallying support for Jeremiah and his mother. Volunteers arrived at their home within days, repairing the roof, painting the walls, and fixing the creaky porch steps. Neighbors pitched in too, bringing food and supplies. The once neglected yard was transformed into a vibrant space, filled with flowers and freshly planted grass. Jeremiah watched in awe as the community came together for his family. For so long he had felt invisible, but now people saw him, and they cared. One sunny Saturday, a small celebration was held in the yard to mark the completion of the repairs. Tables were set up with food and drinks, and laughter filled the air. Jeremiah's mother, looking tired but grateful, stood beside Turner, her eyes shining with emotion. Thank you, she said softly. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you." "You don't have to," Turner assured her. "This is what community is about, helping each other out." Jeremiah ran up to them, a bright smile on his face. "Mom, look. They even fixed the swing." She laughed, the sound light and free. "Go try it out, sweetheart." As Jeremiah raced toward the swing, Turner turned to her. "He's a special kid," he said. "He is," she agreed, "and he's stronger than I ever realized." "That strength comes from you," Turner said sincerely. She blinked back tears. "Thank you for seeing us, for not turning away." Turner nodded. "It's my job, and my privilege." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jeremiah sat on the porch steps, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky. Turner joined him, the two of them sitting in comfortable silence. "You did good, kid," Turner said. "You spoke up, and look what happened." Jeremiah's voice was thoughtful. "I didn't think anyone would care." "People care more than you think," Turner said. "Sometimes you just have to let them in." Jeremiah looked up at the sky, his expression peaceful. "I guess I'm not so invisible anymore." Turner smiled. "No, Jeremiah, you never were." As the first fireflies began to dance in the twilight, Jeremiah knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with hope, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that he was never truly alone. And with Officer Turner by his side, the road ahead didn't seem so daunting anymore.